As we saw, Lord Pearson admitted he wasn't great at party politics. No one's really disagreed with that, have they?
Listen, Lord Pearson's a wonderful man. He's been in the House of Lords since 1990. He's honest, he's straight, he's succeeded in many things in his life, in business, in charity, and in terms of UKIP. He was good at raising money, he was good at putting structures in place, he didn't enjoy the party politics game, and he had the guts to stand up and say it. And isn't that a refreshing change in politics today, where hardly anybody else ever admits they've got anything wrong at all?
So a fundraiser maybe rather than a leader, but I mean, when you look back at that campaign, you know, a leader who said on air in an interview that he couldn't actually remember the policies very much, and of course the party failing to gain even one seat. Do you look back at that campaign and say, OK, hands up, it was a bit of a disaster?
Well, look, you know, we increased the number of votes we got by 50% on the previous general election. That was progress. We could have made more, but that's the past. And now what we're talking about is moving forward. You know, we're a party that does very well in proportional representation in European elections. We came second in 2009 across the entire UK, and now we face next year Welsh, Scottish, Northern Irish and English local elections. We've got a lot to do.
Sure, but you know, the bit where you're really recognised is going to be in a general election, and if you look back, I mean, I guess in the spirit of candour, which your party's pretty good at the moment, you might say, you know what, Buckingham was the wrong seat to pick. I came third behind a...
Look, in life, you know, the easy option is to do nothing. I tend to take risks. Perhaps I take rather too many. I get some things right, I get some things wrong. That's fine. But I've decided today to throw my hat into the ring because I believe I've got the experience. I believe I'm able to deliver the kind of messages that UKIP voters want to hear. I've got the track record of raising money for the party in the past, and I'm going to try and have another go.
I don't know if there's a sort of Rip Van Winkle feeling here that, you know, last time you were leader of UKIP, the world was a very different place. Politics has changed now beyond all recognition, and there is that sense that sort of UKIP is still just looking at the same single issue. It's in danger of you know, being in the same pub with the same pipe, looking a bit old-fashioned, isn't it?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, your previous report about the crackpot idea that perhaps the European Union would impose a Tobin tax upon the City of London and cause financial mayhem and job losses for us just goes to prove the point that far from being a single issue, you know, there is no aspect of our national life that is not now affected directly by EU membership. Over 75% of our laws are made there. It really is the elephant in the room of British politics. We ought to talk about it, and above all, the British people ought to have a referendum about it. And that is not diminishing, it's growing.
The trouble is, though,
now,
but you know, the Tories are arguing that line, or will be arguing that line in Brussels.
No, they're not.
And Labour's got a new leader. There is that sense that you've become slightly redundant, haven't you?
Look, the Tories promised a referendum and broke their promise.
Gotcha, bitch.
William Hague has now signed us up.
I'm sorry, I'm not talking about that referendum, but I'm talking about where you started, the Tobin tax and the position of, you know, Britain and the other European leaders. I mean, they're doing all that now. They're in power. They're in government.
They're in power. And since they came to power, they've signed us up to a European foreign policy, to a European external action service. They are not resisting anything at all. And if you're a Eurosceptic, the Conservative Party has now ceased to exist. And in terms of UKIP, and I agree with you, politics has changed very much since, you know, 4.5 years ago when I first became leader of UKIP. There are now 3 Social Democrat parties in Britain. The vacuum that exists in British politics is enormous, and what we have to do as a party is we have to professionalise, we have to get better people, we have to raise the money, and if we do that, we'll surprise you.
Forgive me, you've called it a vacuum, but you've also said that you're in favour of proportional representation. What we've got here is that classic, if you like, solution. They've got their coalition. Are you in favour of that?
I don't... Listen, it is becoming increasingly irrelevant who gets the keys to the door to number 10, because whilst they have the position, in reality, they don't have the power. We've given that away. And that is something that people are waking up to and are understanding, and it's why we will fight and fight and fight in local elections, in general elections, until the British people are given a free and a fair referendum so that they can decide their own future.
And is it increasingly irrelevant who wins the Labour leadership? Next month?
Yeah, because, you know, the Labour Party will choose somebody who is virtually indistinguishable in terms of background and policy from Clegg and Cameron.
So who would be your biggest fear?
Frankly, the biggest fear I've got is UKIP itself. We have got to transform this party and make it relevant to domestic elections. I recognise that's going to be a big challenge. I recognise we've got a lot to do. If the party chooses me again to be its leader, I'll do my best to make it happen.
Nigel Farage, thanks very much indeed.
Concertinaed down into 3 minutes. Didn't I look young once? I was even quite shy when I started off, you know. But it just goes to show that sometimes the good things in life have to be fought for. The good things in life take time to come to fruition. That the good things in life, in the face of the opposition of the establishment, are hard to achieve. But it all makes you realise, doesn't it, that in 2016, with the Brexit vote and the election of Donald Trump, we stuffed the establishment. We did. And the really good news is that here we are, over a year on, and that revolution that you were all a part of, that revolution is still rolling. It's still rolling across the West. Back in 2000, just 8% of the votes in Europe went to patriotic parties. This year, it is 24% of the vote that is going to patriotic parties, and that number can only go up. And I think the real inspiration now for the future is going to be the man that appeared on this stage and spoke to you this morning. You know, I was very happy to support in any way I could Donald Trump's campaign back in 2016. I now think, with him over a year into the presidency, it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. I really do. I really do. I thought he'd be good, but I got to tell you, he has exceeded all expectations. He's on the way to being a truly great president of this country. And I was lucky. I was fortunate this morning that shortly after he came off this stage, I got the chance to have a conversation with him. And I must say, my impression of him today was, here was a president at ease with himself. Here was a president in good humour. And here was a president at the very top of his game. So there's plenty of good news out there, but we must not and we should not underestimate our enemies. The establishment are still not reconciled with those shock results as they saw them back in 2016. The establishment, in some ways, are fighting harder to damage the reputation of the president and indeed to try to delay, water down or stop Brexit. These people will never stop. And you've seen it here in this country, that now the mainstream media have actually become the opposition. They're not objectively reporting news. 90% of what you see on mainstream media in the States is negative about the president. Mind you, I suppose given the state the Democrats are in, maybe there needs to be an opposition of some kind in this country. Because they kind of haven't quite got their act together, have they? In fact, I'm hearing stories that maybe they'll nominate Hillary next time round as well. Don't boo, you should jolly well hope they do. He'll win by a lot more than last time, believe me. But it's reached a level where they themselves are now engaged in some of the most bizarre conspiracy theories. If you read centre-left broadsheet newspapers in this country and in the United Kingdom, you will be aware that I too am a person of interest to the FBI. I've read that actually I am at the centre of an international spider's web. I am the one person connecting Trump, Putin, and Julian Assange. I've been running memory sticks back and forth from the White House and the Kremlin to Assange. I mean, I have to tell you, I hadn't realised I was that important. I really hadn't. I'm told the next time I set foot on US soil, I'm going to be arrested, I'm going to be put in front of Mueller because of my Russian connections. Oh, and what is without doubt is that I've been funded by the Russians for my entire political career. Well, let me tell you, I've never been to Russia, I've never been to Moscow, I've never met a Russian operative or agent, I've never done business in Russia, I've never taken money from Russia. I may be guilty of drinking the odd Russian vodka. But I know from my own part in this story that the whole thing can be summed up by a simple term. It is just fake news, isn't it? It's fake news, and it's fake news to suggest that the president colluded with the Russians in his election campaign. He didn't, but you know what? When this is over, they still won't stop. They still will never accept that their view of the world has been turned upside down. They will keep on fighting. They will keep trying to damage the reputations of everybody involved with the conservative patriotic movement. So we must not underestimate just how powerful our enemies are. Just think of George Soros.